And so I thought, well, let's go back to the original vineyard, which all of the original hearers of this would have known about. And this is the Isaiah text that we had today. And so the Isaiah text today is the basis of the vineyard that then comes forward into all the gospel vineyards that are there. So we have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And then we have the book of Isaiah. And the book of Isaiah is oftentimes thought about as being the fifth gospel. And when you come from Isaiah, which is in the Old Testament, and you bring it forward into Matthew, you know that the speakers of Matthew are going to have known about Isaiah because it was there first. And we know that Matthew is that bridge gospel from the Old Testament to the New Testament. So there's a couple of things about the book of Isaiah that I want you to know. First of all, Isaiah was thought to be written over about a 600-year time span. So if that's the case, obviously the same person did not write it. So it was thought to have believed to begin around 700 years before Jesus was born. And it was thought to have been written over till about 70 years after Jesus died. And so in that span, they think that there were probably three writers. The first writer was the actual prophet called Isaiah, and that's Isaiah from about 1 to about 60, those first books. 1 to about 34, those first books. And then you've got the second part of Isaiah, which has the longest span. It was probably written about over 400 years by an anonymous writer. And then you've got this last part of Isaiah, and it's about the last 12 chapters, and it was written after Jesus died, and it was thought to have been written again by another anonymous writer. But what's so cool about Isaiah is that we get these great words that we use now, like taking pieces of farming equipment and hitting it into plowshares, and then all handles Messiah. How beautiful is that? That all comes from Isaiah. And so the original vineyard was in the book of Isaiah. And so that's what we're talking about today. And it's in the early part of Isaiah, so we know it was actually written by the prophet Isaiah itself. And it talks, the very first thing God is talking about, my beloved vineyard. Oh, my love. I mean, you think it might be something God likes, something God's excited about, something that God has poured every single bit of God's self into this vineyard. Just blessed it and spoiled it and given it the best nutrients and gone out and found the very best manure God could find and just gave it all the nutrients and all the sun and all the water and everything to make this garden grow. God was so proud of this garden and the grapes that it was going to produce and the wine that it was going to produce and the grapevines and everything God had, God put into this garden. And what do you think happened? Wild grapes. It did not matter how much God nurtured these grapes. They turned wild. There wasn't any way that God could control them. And at first God said, well, maybe if I just pluck out some of the wild grapes. But that didn't work. Why? Because then they all started turning wild. They all started following that way. And God said, well, I guess the only thing I can do is to start all over and to pull up all of the grapes and to throw it all away. Even though I gave it everything I had, I gave it everything I had. I gave it the best. I loved it. I nurtured it. I did everything. And all I can do now is to rip it all up and throw it out. Who do you think are the grapes? Come on, point to yourself. You know it's you. We are the grapes. God has given us everything, and not just us. From the beginning of time, God has given us everything. I mean, when you hear this, do you not have visions of Noah and the ark and killing everybody except for the 8 people that were left? By the way, that's why there's 8 sides of a baptismal font in a lot of churches, because there were 8 people left from the flood. And so when you go, especially into East and West Texas, and look at baptismal fonts, they'll be 8-sided, representing that. So, Genesis has the flood. Here we are in Isaiah a little bit later, and behold, we made a mess again. Us grapes, we are just rotten and wild. What can we say? So, what Isaiah tells us is there's a shift in Isaiah that says we are based in God's righteousness, not in us following the Ten Commandments. You get that shift? We're based in us being right with God, which is exactly the gospel, that we are right with God, not in what we do to follow the commandments. In other words, it is about God righting us. It's not about us doing good things to please God. It's right here in Isaiah, this big shift, that we do the things the Ten Commandments say for our love for God and for wanting to be with God, not the other way around. God loves us because we did the Ten Commandments. God loves us anyway. All right. So, the vineyard owner has decided, and verse 1, God's given us everything. Verse 2, the vineyard owner says, oh, have to start all over. And we really hear this lamentation, especially in Holy Week. And when we hit the stripping of the altar on Good Friday, and we say, God says, I gave you this, and you didn't take care of it. What else can I do for you? I did this, you didn't take care of it. What else can I do for you? I gave you this, and you didn't take care of it. What else can I do for you? God, my God, I gave you everything, including my son who you killed. Why? What more can I do? Good Friday, right here in just the second line. But you know, it's hard to hear these truths, isn't it? It's hard to hear when we are the ones that didn't do what we were supposed to do or what we could do. Because we kind of like to be in control. We like to kind of be the one to set the rules. We kind of like the ones to say, oh, it's okay, it really wasn't that bad. It's easy for us to speak the truth to power when the power is somewhere else. But what happens when the truth is spoken to power and we are the power, and someone is telling us as the person or people in power that we're not doing it quite correct? How does that feel? So I want to ask, I am not a white male. I don't know if you noticed that or not. But to the white males out there, how does it feel to you to be told that there is white male privilege? I'm asking, how does it feel? Do you believe it? Can you hear it? Will you work to change it? Here's a fact. In 2022, last year, white women 54 and under were paid 82 cents to the dollar to white males. Is that fair? Older women, older than 54, black women and Hispanic women were paid 80 cents to the dollar. There is an unspoken fatherhood wage premium. First time I had heard those words, but I understand exactly what they're talking about. That is 20% more that men make than women. And if I'm completely honest, when both of my sons have gotten that big bump that usually comes in late 30s, early 40s, it's like, yes, you go. And when my daughters got it, it was like, that's really nice. Okay. I'm still part of the problem. I'm still accepting it. All right, and so how does it feel to white people when they're told there's systematic racism? How do we continue to use words that are racially connected to connotations? And some of these I did not even know, that I knew I was using them, but I did not know where they came from. One of them is the peanut gallery. The peanut gallery came because those were the cheapest seats in a theater. And most of the time, they were seats where people didn't want to sit. And so most of the time, they were the seats where the people that had less money sat. Then the peanut gallery with Howdy Doody became the place where the children sat. And the comment of, we don't want to hear any comments from the peanut gallery, talked about the small children. Children were supposed to be seen and not heard. So when we use it in our everyday vernacular, the roots of what we're saying is that there are people that are less important than others by socioeconomic or by the sheer fact that they're small. I did not know this about being the grandfathered clause. I know I have used it quite frequently. Can't we be grandfathered in on that so we don't have to meet these new requirements or whatever? And the whole thing about grandfathered clauses is a way to get around let me get it right, I believe it's the 15th Amendment that said that everybody had to have the same rights. And so they would say, except if you're grandfathered in on this, knowing that there were people that didn't have to meet this new criteria because they were grandfathered in. So it has a very socioeconomic basis behind it too. We'll let you not have to meet these because you were there first. All right, the word gypped. Oh, I was gypped. Anybody ever say that? Yeah. Well, that comes from the gypsies. These are Romy people. They are not from Rome. They are not from Romania. They were a group of actors and singers, and to make a career of actors and singers, you cannot stay in the same place. You have to go from town to town and go all the way around to get people to listen to you to pay for that. Well, this was a different lifestyle than the majority of people lived, because the majority of people lived in one place forever. And so the gypsies would go around, and what happens if someone is new to the community and something bad happens? Who gets blamed for it? They do. So everything that happened, they blamed it on these gypsies. And so that's how the gypped word came up. Now, can I tell you that every gypsy never stole? Probably not, because every single one of us at some point have stolen. And if you fill out those forms and say you never stole, they'll know you're lying. I'm just telling you. But that's where we get the word gyp. And so when we use that, we are racially discriminating. And did you know, I thought this was fascinating, the gypsies are the highest rated racially abused ethnicity in the whole wide world. And that at a time, they said in Europe that it was okay to kill gypsies, and then they had to make an amendment to it, but you cannot drown women and children because so many were being killed. Uppity. Uppity says that there is one group and they are superior, they are up, and anybody that tries to act like them are just uppity. It's usually racial. They love to say Michelle Obama was acting uppity. And another word that goes with that is articulate. I would see a lot of this when we lived in North Carolina with the Appalachian people. And the people that lived there that came into the big cities, and they would try very hard to be articulate. And they would say, oh, they're just trying to be articulate, or they're just trying to be uppity. Basically, they're saying they're trying to be better than they were because they came from this lower socioeconomic class. Now, this is a modern day one that I wasn't aware of. Spirit animals. Now, living in Arizona and North Carolina as long as we did, the Native Americans, the indigenous people, have what are called spirit animals. And the spirit animals are an animal that they connect with, that they feel that is very important to them. Well, apparently, it has been used for the plankton in SpongeBob. Who knew? And also Rihanna said that she had a spirit animal, and in these two incidences, they have said that it describes a thing that deeply relates to the person, like the plankton in SpongeBob. But that's not the Native American use for it. The Native American use for it is that it is something that speaks to them and that makes them better. It's a heart feeling. It's not a head feeling. And so Rihanna was called on this, and they said, you're saying this, and the indigenous people are taking offense to it, because what you're saying is your spirit animal is something you like. And spirit animals from the indigenous point of view is something that is on a spiritual level. It's not just something you like. And to her credit, Rihanna responded, you're right, I won't let it happen again. This is what we are being called to do when we use terms that put someone else down, is to acknowledge that we've done it and to try to change how we are. Paddy wagon. Can you guess what a slur that's against? Irish. Irishes were called Paddies because so many of them were Patricks. And when they first came to this country, they did what a lot of lower income people did. After they worked all week, they would go out and they would get drunk. And then they would get loud and belligerent, and they would get put in a vehicle and taken to jail to sleep it off. And that became the paddy wagon because there were so many paddies, Irish paddies, that were put in it, like St. Paddy's Day. Long time no see. Who's ever said that? I have. No can do. Do you know the basis of this? It goes back to the Chinese immigrants when they were first learning our language, and they would not always get clear sentences out. And so they would say, long time no see, or no can do. And so when we say that, what we are saying is, even not knowing it, is we are making offensive gestures towards the Chinese or anybody that doesn't really have our language. Sold down the river, slavery. And when you're sold down the river and you were a slave, it usually meant your death. So anytime something's, they just betrayed me, they just sold me down the river. That's what we're bringing up, that connotation. Being blacklisted, blackballed, blackmarked, all of those were introduced into the English language just to connect black and darkness with bad things. And then off the reservation. This meant an indigenous person did something different than they were expected to do when they were on the reservation, which is where they were placed by the government. And if they went off the reservation, it was a bad thing to do. And eeny, meeny, miny, moe. I can remember, especially with my little kids' toes, going eeny, meeny, miny, moe, and then you tickle them and everything. It wasn't catch a tiger by the toe originally. It wasn't catch a tinker by the toe or attach a piggy by the toe. But what's interesting is that young children have changed this. They don't know it the way that those of us that were raised in the 40s, 50s, and 60s were. So if a young child can change their way of viewing the world, I ask, can we? How does it feel to all of us here that call themselves American when it's pointed out that true Americans are indigenous people? That all of us, large portion of us, are refugees from somewhere. I will proudly tell you that my family came over from England. My grandkids love the fact that Sir Francis Drake, a pirate, was in their lineage. There's nothing cooler when you're a 10-year-old little boy than to know that you had a pirate in your lineage. So this is a true story. This actually happened. Phoenix, where I lived for 20 years, has a large indigenous population. The Navajo Nation is in Arizona. And so there was a big craft fair, a big place in Phoenix that I love to go to every year, and there were people from all over the world that came. But at this particular place, it was a quilting station, and they had, the fabrics were amazing. And the intricacy of everything that was being done. And so there were people standing around looking at all of this. And there were these two moms and their daughters. And their daughters were probably each in their 50s. So I'm just going to, you pick how old the mom was. So the moms and the daughters are standing there, and they're looking at all this quilting stuff, and it's beautiful. And one group was standing over here, and they were talking in a language that wasn't familiar to my ears at all. And I was kind of standing back waiting for everybody to move. And then there was this woman and her mom that were standing there. And they apparently wanted to see where this other mom and daughter were standing. And this mom and daughter were talking, and they weren't moving. And so the daughter of the second set said, "Are you ever going to leave?" And the woman there said, "I apologize. I didn't realize that you wanted to, that you were waiting to get over here. We'll finish up quickly." And so the daughter from here turns to her and she goes, "If you can speak English, why don't you speak English? We're in America. We speak English." And the woman turned to her and she said, "I don't know where your family came from, but I'm Navajo Indian, and my family has been here for generations and generations and generations, and we are speaking Navajo." She goes, "Why don't you go back to the country you came from?" And the woman got up and left. I'm not going to ask you who's right and who's wrong, but the indignancy, the entitlement, is exactly what God is talking about with these wild grapes. God says, "I gave this vineyard, I gave this world to all of you, yet you want to think that your version of grapes are better than other people's versions of grapes. You want to think that you're better, that you're higher, and what I don't want to do is I have to kill everybody like I did in Genesis with the flood, or like I had to do again in Isaiah with ripping up the vineyards and throwing them out." And God is still speaking this again when we come into our lesson today, and last week and next week, talking about the vineyards. God's like, how many times do I have to tell you? I love you all. I want you all in this vineyard. I gave all of you this great soil. I gave all of you my love. I gave all of you the rain. I gave all of you Jesus Christ. Why can't you love God, love me, love my son, and love each other? That's all I want. Please take my dirt. Please take my love. Please take my son. Please take my other children. That's all I'm asking you. I will give it all to you. I have given it all to you again and again and again. Grow my grapes. Drink my wine. Eat my food. I give it all just for you. And all God's people say, amen.